All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from YouTube. Lots of gems, lots of realistic fight scenes, lots of, if Betty Ting Pei gave you a headache tablet, would you take it? Let's get to it.
And every day, I practice martial arts.
Yo, Dre, how you doing, man?
I'm good, Sifu. I'm good. You good?
I'm
We
always
all good?
I'm always good.
I'm a bit exhausted. But
Why are you
it is-
exhausted? What happened?
I moved furniture for about 12 hours yesterday.
You moved furniture for 12 hours.
Roughly.
By yourself.
Well,
like
with
big
two-man team, three-man team.
couches
maybe
and
here
sofa
shit
bits.
Like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Why would
Thank you, Mikey Deane.
Yeah, no worries. Why would you?
How did
move
the mic
furniture
move?
Roughly? Why wouldn't you do it correctly?
You know what? Why would he move furniture roughly? You know what I wish Dre would move? The mic in front of his face when he talks, right?
You are asking a bit much.
Yeah. Mikey Deane made an interesting observation about hip-hop people, of which you are a former hip-hopper-ish.
Hip-hopian.
Not being able to know how to,
hip-hoporian.
not knowing how to use mics properly.
Hip-hopster,
all right?
yeah.
Because, for a
We
long...
hold them shit like...
Yeah. Yes. For longtime fans of the podcast, you may have noticed that Dre always puts his mic somewhere off to the side and then starts talking and then moves his head a lot in directions away from the microphone. All right? On top of the fact that
Head
he
movement,
also...
you taught me.
He often describes a lot of things visually, forgetting that more than half of our audience listens to this podcast. He'll be like, "Yo," and then he'll wave his hands around and lose half of our audience there. So anyway, here we are with another AMA. We just recently did the Yip Man history. I got through part 1, so we'll eventually get to part 2.
Okay.
And
That was fun.
that was a lot of fun, and we for an hour and 15 minutes, we didn't even get out of, Yip Man coming to Hong Kong in 1949 yet, right? And that's the point of the part of the story that we know the least about, and somehow I managed to eke out an hour and 15 minutes of content, basically saying, I don't know what happened during this time,
I wasn't there.
but I'm going to keep talking.
I'm going to keep going.
So here we go. So what do you got for me today?
We're going to go into my man Wing Chun Naven.
Naven.
Or Navan.
It's a weird name, though. I never knew anyone named Wing Chun, actually. Like
Yeah. This is really cool.
Mr. Naven.
You gotta
Mr.
love it.
Wing Chun Naven.
Went down.
Yeah.
Went down. Either he was named this in when he was born, or
Right.
he just went and changed that shit.
Could be. All right.
Took
So
the
what do
time
we
to
got?
change it.
What
So,
did he ask?
I think we can all agree that the most realistic fight scene ever filmed was in Bridget Jones' Diary.
Yeah. So that's more of a comment than a question, but I'm gonna have to say
That is a comment. Yes.
This is piggybacking most likely off of the Kung Fu Hustle episode we did a little bit back, where someone had complained that their problem with Kung Fu Hustle is that it wasn't realistic.
Yeah.
To which I retorted that there are no realistic Kung Fu movies, and if you want to watch realism in films, then those films are going to be really disappointing. Because I'm going to tell you something, Dre. The most realistic film, or I should say the most realistic fight scene in a film, is that fight scene in Bridget Jones' Diary, okay? All right? Hugh Grant versus Colin Firth, all right?
Okay.
And you know what's weird? Normally, I wouldn't remember the name of those two chaps, right? Is that what you say, Mikey D?
Chaps.
Right? Because I haven't seen them in much lately, if not for the fact that this film was recently shown at my house again. So it was playing.
Random?
And I happened to watch that part. And so it's really quite a coincidence that Mr. Naven asks this question here, because it's fresh in my mind.
Made this comment.
Because I made this comment because I just watched this fight scene not 2-3 weeks ago, right? Carol said, wow, this is so messy when they're fighting, and I said, this is actually what a fight looks like. For people who don't know, one, you can just go on YouTube and look like Bridget Jones' Diary fight or Hugh Grant, Colin Firth fight. And there's a fight scene. Basically, they're both fighting. I don't know. It's a chick flick. I don't remember the details. They're all the
Right.
same. They're both fighting for I don't know for Renee Zellweger. All right, and they basically get into a fight out in the street. Now, neither one of them are martial artists, nor tough guys, nor athletic, right? And so what ensues is, in my opinion, a very realistic portrayal of what happens when two people actually try to beat each other up. And I'll even go so far as to say, even people with martial arts training could end up looking exactly like these two guys look in this fight scene, right?
Oh, right.
Because what you see is, kind of wild swings, and you see a weird escalation where someone hits the other guy wasn't expecting it, and then the other guy comes back in rage, and then they're kind of grappling and tussling, but because they are not grapplers, they hold on to each other with no aim. Mm-hmm. If a grappler gets a hold of your waist or takes your back, they're going to do something with that. They're going to drag you down to the ground. They're going to put you in a choke. They're going to use it to do a throw. But you see, when people don't have any martial arts skill, when they grapple, they're just holding on because we're primates that like to grab onto things. But because they don't have any techniques, it kind of doesn't go anywhere. Like, they're holding on, but there's no like, okay, now what are you going to do? And then they'll fall down. And then you see them throw these kind of kicks at each other, which
Those
are like
kicks.
way out of distance and they're like
Awesome
very
kicks.
shittily executed, right? And I'll tell you, all right, that is actually a realistic fight scene.
I've seen at
right.
least 10 of them in my
Yeah,
time.
because especially from your other jobs, like working at the clubs and stuff, when two people go at it, whether alcohol is involved or not, it kind of ends up looking like that, right?
No, these are just with my boys.
Yeah,
Growing up.
yeah, sure. And because that's kind of what it is, right? So, in that Kung Fu Hustle episode where, I kind of got salty about someone who said Kung Fu Hustle was cartoony and not realistic. And, I went on to say, like, look, name one Kung Fu movie that's realistic, right? And then some of the comments talked about, movies like the Raid movies, which those Indonesian films, and
Raid,
Kung Fu
Raid
Killer.
2.
But I would say those films are not realistic. They are hard hitting. All right.
are.
So like, for example, if you look at Yip Man 1, where he's fighting the 10 black belts.
Yeah.
All right. That's a really hard hitting scene. It's violent. You see how he smashes the face of that guy at the end, and it's bloody, and he's breaking knees, and that is really, really hard hitting. But that doesn't mean that that's realistic. You see what I mean? So like, I think we almost need to, if we really want to go down this path of having this argument of realism in fight scenes, I think you need to categorize fight scenes in terms of like fantasy combat, all right, which I would argue is the lion's share of not just kung fu movies, but just films in general, all right?
Okay.
The Bourne Identity, those kind of things. You have hard hitting, which is like the choreography is really impactful.
Okay.
Where like when people get hit, there's like a lot of blood, and it's a little on the gory side, and those films like The Raid, and there was another one like The Night Comes for Us or something like that. I forget the title. I think that's the title of it. It's like ultra violent, and also like not the last Rambo, but the previous Rambo was like.
Oh, yeah. Is that the one where he's in Burma?
Yes. So I would categorize those like ultra-violent films as like hard-hitting, ultra-violent, but that doesn't mean realistic. Okay? So because that's still, in my opinion, another notch. And then you have kind of fantasy combat, and then you have hard-hitting. Now, mind you, a lot of hard-hitting stuff is also fantasy combat. So there's obviously crossover between those two categories. And then the third category would be realistic, right? And I'm sorry, if that category is a very lonely category. You have Bridget Jones' Diary, and then for the longest time, there was a movie I saw back in the day. I think this movie's from the 90s. It was called Once We're Warriors.
Yeah,
and
that's got Tamira Morrison.
That's who's Boba Fett. It's a great film. And for the longest time, I remember I saw that film in Germany, and one of my Seehings said, hey, like, the fight scenes in here are really realistic, all right? And to a certain degree, they are pretty realistic because they're hard-hitting. There's not a lot of flash.
Okay.
And they're very violent, right? But I remember when I first saw it, I was like, wow. First of all, it's a really good film, all right, independent of the
the
violence,
fight scenes,
right?
okay.
But it's there's a lot of it's kind of a rough film. It's not fun family watching.
No.
There's like domestic violence and suicide and stuff like that. It's not a fun Saturday movie, all right? And the fight scenes are really hard hitting. And I remember when I saw it, I was like, wow, it's very rare to actually see something like that because the violence is not cartoonized, it's not fantasized, it's really hard hitting. But then I just recently rewatched it and I go, hard hitting but not realistic. All right, because there's for example, I mean, spoiler alert, it's an old ass movie. There's a fight scene where he finds out that like his boy had done something inappropriate to one of his family members, and he decides to beat the living stuffing out of this guy in a bar. Okay. All right, and it's like head smashing on the bar and like kicking the dude when he's down.
You never see that in a real fight.
No. Actually, you do see stuff like that. Yeah, like people running into stuff.
Okay.
Someone getting knocked back and hitting and getting stomped on the ground.
Oh,
right?
stomps you see.
So that stuff was really realistic. But there was a part where there were 5 guys trying to hold him back, and he basically just shook them off and then kept beating the guy up. And I go, That's where we got out of the realistic.
That's where
all right?
we left. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that. There seems to be a contingency of fight bros or martial arts people that are like, oh, if the fight scene is not realistic, I don't want to watch it. I don't want to see CGI. And I'm not a big fan of CGI and martial arts stuff, but they don't want to see anything that's somewhat fantasized, right? And I go, well, if you really want to see realistic combat, then go watch Bridget Jones's Diary. Go watch that one scene. Because even Once We're Warriors, as hard-hitting as it is, that's still not realistic. It portrays violence in a very gritty way. But I wouldn't say it's 100% realistic, all right? I would say it's mostly realistic. Okay, there's just a couple little bits in there, like in the bar scene, where you're not gonna shake off 5 dudes kind of holding you back, right? Other than that, I would actually say Once We're Warriors is mostly realistic. Then there's Bridget Jones's Diary, all right. Then there's the first Austin Powers scene. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
No, and then if you really think about it, when you look at what fights actually look like, whether they're between people who know martial arts or not. I mean, talking about actual fights, not talking about martial art contests, not talking about Kimbo Slice backyard boxing. Right.
Talking
about just fights, assaults, those kind of things.
Drunk.
Look, when I used to work at the club, I remember once I was just on my phone doing something, and then I got knocked. A fight happened right next to me.
Yeah. In the DJ booth?
No. I was actually just out. The upstairs was shut, so I was just on the stairs. Fight happened next to me, and I got pulled into it. And very, very stupidly, I just turned around and cracked whoever did it to me, right?
Oh, no.
Not realizing that it was one of our regular customers who might be a bit well connected. He used to be an enforcer for a organized crime.
Oh, no.
Now, luckily, he didn't...
cracked an enforcer?
He cracked me back, right?
Okay.
Now, and then I was like, okay, I'm getting out of this. I hope he didn't realize it was me, because we were on really good terms. But the point is that, the thing was, some guy had, come into their table and touched his girlfriend inappropriately. Okay. He was a big spender, so we...
As opposed to touch his girlfriend appropriately.
Right.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine, right? But, it was a big spender, so, he was one of our clients who we wanted to keep on side. It's one of those awful hospitality things where any other bar, you just kick him out, right? But, no, we got to be nice, right? And he's beating the living F out of this guy. And it ain't pretty. But this guy, he knows 3 different styles. He trains all the time. That's his job. And then in an actual fight scene, when he's just really just angry, he's just pummeling the dude.
Right.
But then you'd see that sort of thing on something like McDojo Life, and all of those idiots are like, well, why isn't he using any of his styles? That's not realistic.
Right, because this shit is real.
Yeah.
When I had a call over the radio. Code red, dance floor. You run to the dance floor. And this
we got
is
a disco emergency.
Yeah. Actually, there was a disco ball there, too. And these are some high ceilings, metal fans.
Okay.
And I swear, I saw this guy do the most genius thing anyone has ever done. He took a bottle, like maybe a Heineken bottle, threw it up in the air to the fans, smashed the bottle, and it literally all the broken glass all over everyone. Everyone was like, oh, but the brawl was happening. We couldn't do anything because we had broken glass, and he kept throwing bottles. We were like, what? We can't get over it. Yeah, it was crazy. Because we were worried about the glass.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. Genius.
That's crazy, right?
Genius dude.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I think...
not realistic.
Yeah, not realistic. Somehow it happened in the real world, but it wasn't realistic.
Unrealistic.
Right?
You don't see that
like,
anywhere.
People don't realize like just how dangerous actual fights are and how difficult they are to manage when someone is resisting you. We're not talking about, we're not having a jiu-jitsu match on a mat. We're not having a kickboxing match. We're not having a sparring match. This is like punches, kicks, people trying to grab you. You're on uneven surfaces. You're not wearing athletic clothes. There's all sorts of things that, like, I think people don't take into consideration.
Factors,
right?
Yeah.
I remember a very long time ago, there was someone who practiced martial arts.
Yeah.
And this person was a bit of a hothead. And what was weird is that this person was in their 40s.
Yeah.
And, I'm in my 40s now. I was not in my 40s back then. I was much younger.
Yeah, we tend to calm down when we get into
You tend to calm
that
down,
threshold,
right?
yeah.
This person seemed to have done the opposite, you know.
Oh,
when you hit when you hit your midlife crisis, as I have, all right? As all three of us have, right? All right.
Crisis.
What do we do? Okay, Mikey Deane becomes a rock star co-host of the most amazing kung fu podcast ever. All
that's
right?
that's what we do.
He also dyed his hair pink like a few weeks ago.
I remember
if I
this.
recall, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's the kind of stuff Mikey Deane does in his
Midlife crisis.
Midlife crisis. What do
What
you
do I
do?
do?
You get your driver's license and get a Mercedes.
Oh yeah, that's
All
right.
That's
That
right.
is-
Now
Lexus.
yeah,
That is
or
what
so-
I-
yeah. No, we got a
I
Mercedes.
wanted to
right?
get a Lexus,
But I
for
told
so
you not
much
to,
time.
right? Okay, don't.
I couldn't
don't-
find one for
Don't
for
spend
my
that much
range.
money on a Toyota, please. I don't care if they call it a Lexus. All right.
Find one.
It's a what is a Lexus called in
Yeah.
Japan? It's called a Toyota. 'Cause
Yeah.
that's what it is. All right.
Woo, I still love them though.
And what did I do? I don't know. I created my own podcast.
Yeah.
No. I got a pretty slick ass sports car as well,
yeah.
right? Okay. So yeah, look, I get it. I get midlife crisis, right? So anyway, this martial artist in his midlife crisis decided that the thing that he was going to do was get into fights because apparently he had not
He didn't
really
get
gotten
enough
into
fights
fights. Almost like
as a 20-year-old.
yeah, it's almost like the plot of Fight Club kind of thing, right?
Okay.
And I had warned this individual not to do that, all right? Especially because this individual was married and also, had a family and stuff. It's like, maybe this isn't the
wanna
thing to
tone it
do,
down a
but
bit,
this person was very difficult to communicate with, all right? And so this person decided to get a job in security at a club.
Yeah.
And but not for the idea of this is the job they want to do, but for the idea of this is a potential avenue to get into a fight. As a hired security person, which of course because you were in that industry, right? This is the wrong thing because your job is not to get into fights. No, it's the opposite.
Oh
all right?
damn.
So this person started working for a club, I believe it was in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And somebody tried to come into the club, and this person was being a bit problematic. And normally you either don't let that person into the club or you let that person whatever, right? This person decided, no man, this is my shot.
This is my opportunity.
And more or less unprompted, all right, just kind of like a light escalation, a light ego escalation. This guy decides to launch into him and do his martial arts thing.
Oh, dear.
And beats the stuffing out of this guy. And then promptly gets fired from that job. Okay? Regardless of that fact, tells me about it and tells me how, and I totally beat that dude's ass.
And he probably said, hey.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, okay.
You
And
look
then
nice
he's like,
tonight.
yeah, exactly, right? And got fired from that job. And I was like, okay. He ends up getting another job somehow. Similar job.
Different company, of
And
course.
a different company, of course, yeah, right? And similar thing happens. A guy, gets in, but this guy, I think, in the second club, this guy was a much more dangerous person, all right? I have the feeling that the person that this martial artist assaulted as the security guard the first time was not like a tough guy. It was just, he just assaulted someone who said something to him because he didn't like him and he wanted to prove he could do his martial arts. The second time, similar thing happened, but the guy that he did it with was... like the Wu-Tang Clan, ain't nothing to fuck with. Okay. So some words are exchanged. I don't know. The guy wants to come in, and this martial artist that I know doesn't want to let him in. And suddenly, the guy kind of motions somewhat aggressively, and then the martial artist that I know just launches into him, knocks him back, kind of basically sucker punches him, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, this is like his big thing. He wants to like try himself out as a martial artist and then ends up getting a job where he can kind of like sucker punch and jump people who are not expecting him to do that, right?
Oh, shit.
It starts this back and forth kind of slog between him and this guy here. Unbeknownst to the guy that I know, the other guy, his boys are there.
His boys are there?
His boys are there.
Yeah.
All right?
That's not surprising.
No, well, it's not surprising for anyone except this person, right?
Okay.
Because who thinks he's some kind of superhero, right? And one of the guy's boys comes behind him and hits him with something, and then grabs his head and smashes his head into like a railing or a table, breaking his nose instantly. And then suddenly there's this melee, and he ends up getting the crap kicked out of him, and he's in the hospital, and he's all busted up, broken face or whatever, right? Because he decided that in his 40s he needs to start Breaking Bad, right? And it was weird because at that time, I was younger, right? I was like in my early 30s. And it was weird for me to have to tell, because at that point in my life, I was still a shithead at 32. I was worried I was going to die like Bruce Lee, right?
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Yeah, that's another story.
That's the year.
And but even at that time, I was like, it felt strange for me to have to tell someone who was, let's say, 12 years my senior, things that I would probably have to tell someone who was 18 years old. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like the kind of things you would tell some young buck who's a little too full of testosterone. Like, hey, buddy, you might want to take it easy because this is not the path to go. Getting security gigs at clubs in Brooklyn just so you have the and you know how wild Brooklyn can get, just so that you have the chance to like use your skills might not really be the path you want to go, right? And he ended up, I think he was emboldened by that first experience, even though he got fired, because for him, I don't think it was actually about the job or the money.
Felt like an Iron Man or something.
Yeah, he beat up he assaulted the first guy, let's be honest. Damn. All right? And then the second guy he goes to assault, it ends up totally, flipping and burning up in his face, right?
Jeez.
And it was weird for me to have to, like, what do you tell a grown-ass man who doesn't understand that? Because that I feel would be a lesson I would have to impart on someone who is 16, 17, 18 years old maybe. And then once they're in their 20s, they might still do it, but they know better. But by the time they're in their 30s, they wouldn't do it. And by the time they're in their 40s, they would be horrified at the thought.
That behavior tapers off, yeah.
Absolutely, right?
It should.
Yeah. Especially as your balls produce less tea, you start to go, nah, maybe not. Right?
Did you visit him in the hospital and tell him this information?
I saw him after, right?
Okay.
And I just remember looking at his face and just thinking, like, I have to console him because he's someone that I know, but just going like, what a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
I mean, like, come on.
That shit's real, though. You know what I mean? It's like kind of like he might have been hot-headed, but I understand what it's like not to get into a fight and then be like, It was actually taking up Wing Chun that helped me deal with that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because younger, I was a much more timid guy and like stronger than most people around me, but like I got my ass beat tons of times because I was always like, oh, I should never hit back and all this kind of bullshit, which I later found out was just not actually a real thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? But like, that's the problem. People get a taste of something in their order and they feel like they missed out.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's like, I've
absolutely.
known, I've known people who didn't do drugs when they were younger and then in their 30s got super fucked up. Excuse my language.
Sure.
Because they're like, oh my God, I missed this for 20 years.
Yes.
And then they just go
like
in.
making up for lost time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So, of course, let's go to a bar.
There's nothing like
fights.
There's nothing like early ass kickings in your life to let you know. That's why I think learning martial arts at a young age is so important, because it's really good for understanding and dealing with your ego. if you're successful, maybe, you know, in sparring or you do competitions as a kid or something like that, okay, maybe literally learn. You win some, you lose some. Sometimes you do fine, sometimes you get your ass kicked. And I think that that's a very important lesson to learn very early on because it allows you to make much better assessments as you get older. Because you know, yeah, on a good day, when everything is lined up for me, I could maybe beat this dude up. If I slip on a banana peel, I won't, all right? And I think that getting your ass kicked at some point in your life, even if it's just, it doesn't mean like you get beat up and bloody. They're just saying like someone kind of shows you like...
Reality check.
Yeah, like if you're like a teenager and then you tussle with an adult and you feel man strength. And then it's like, oh, okay. I think that that's important, right? And I think if that doesn't happen until much later... I think then there's an incongruence between what you think you can do and what you actually should do, right? Hey, Kung Fu Genius listeners, are you a fan of Wing Chun Kung Fu? Well, if you listen to me, I assume you are. I got great news for KFG fans. Right now, you can get an all-access 1-month free trial subscription to Wing Chun Illustrated magazine. Yes, I said free. Go to WCINewsstand.com and register in the upper right-hand corner. Fill out your email and password and use the code KFG Trial to get your free trial to all the issues from 2011 to the current issue. That's right, all the issues, even the one with this cool guy on the cover. That's me for those of you listening to us on audio. My Kung Fu Genius column is also in all the new issues, as if you needed another reason to get this awesome magazine. Go get your free trial subscription today. For all that information, check out the description below. And now back to me. By the way, that whole thing when I turned 32, you know that I'm not a superstitious person, right? You know that, right?
Somewhat, yeah.
All right. I don't believe in any like weird deities, although I believe in the magical healing powers of the hawk.
Okay.
Okay. But besides that,
That was my hawk impersonation.
it was good. Hawk. Yeah. But besides believing in the magical healing powers of the hawk, you know, I don't believe in any overseeing deities that give a shit about what we're doing.
Does this hawk have a first name? Oh, Mike.
All right.
Cool.
And I also don't believe in and I don't believe in superstitions. I like breaking glass or going under ladders or stuff like that. Like you guys are such children. That's such a child's joke. All right. That's such a child's joke.
I can't take it.
All right.
I can't take it.
Yes. All right.
Yes.
You know what's weird?
We didn't even get to the second question.
There you
yet.
know we're going through a midlife crisis where you laugh at a hawk joke.
He has a brother called Hunt.
Yeah, he's
Mike.
Yeah. And he's got another brother. No, never mind. We're not going there. We're not going there. We're not going there. All right. So anyway, so I'm not one for like superstition and stuff like that, right? But when I turned 32, I was, for some odd reason, worried I was gonna croak like Bruce Lee at 32.
That whole year must have been brutal.
I was nervous, and I was also like really disappointed in myself. Because at that point
you didn't achieve enough at that point.
Yeah, at that point I had been teaching. I'd been running City Wing Chun, let's say, for 7-8 years, and the school was doing well. But I go like, man, at this point in Bruce Lee's life, he had already like. Even though he wasn't like an established martial arts instructor like with big schools and stuff, like he had already taught like a bunch of people who were already doing their thing and all these different people. He had like designed his own martial art. Not that I wanted to design my own martial art, but he had done this. He had done all these movies. He had done all this shit. And then he dies suddenly at 32, and at 32, I'm like, enrolling people to join in my Wing Chun school.
Wow.
And the school's doing really well, but I'm like, I haven't become an iconic movie star yet, right? Not that I wanted to be a movie guy, but just the idea of like, where, and this is always where I think the source of a lot of people's pressure and pain. It's always this comparison thing, right? Like, obviously, my path is very different than Bruce Lee's, very different from yours, very different from anyone else's. So this comparison thing is not really a fair thing because I had never in my life wanted to be a movie star in Hollywood or a martial arts movie star in Hollywood. Yet I get to 32 and suddenly I'm like, I haven't done this stuff that Bruce Lee did, even though that was never my goal or my intention or my path, right? But I got suddenly, for 1 year in my life, really superstitious.
Yeah.
I thought I wasn't going to make it past my 32nd year. And part of it, I don't know, could be my first wife was Taiwanese, and Bruce Lee died in the apartment of a Taiwanese woman, and I'm thinking like, oh my god, I do Wing Chun. Bruce Lee did Wing Chun.
All these dots.
All right, I'm 32. Bruce Lee was 32. Taiwan, forget it. I'm like, it's over. It's over.
The dots are connecting all over the place.
I'm going to drop dead. All right? And so I
got Equagesic in the cabinet.
Yeah, I grew my hair out.
Oh.
Like, because Bruce
You
Lee
had the upside down teardrop?
Bruce Lee had long hair, in the 70s, right?
No, don't tell me you had an upside down teardrop.
No, I kept, dude, I turned into Howard Hughes, man. I kept growing my hair longer and longer and longer, right?
What?
And so if you see, only people who are connected with me on Facebook, if you look at like old ass photos of me from, I guess it would be the late 2000s, right? When I turned 32, 2009, I guess. I had long. I grew my hair long.
Right.
Damn.
Like I grew my hair like down to here.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And for some weird reason, even though Bruce never had hair quite that long, it was like this weird. I felt that Bruce had long hair. He did Wing Chun. He died at 32. If I have long hair, I do Wing Chun, and I survived 32. I've overcome it. I've overcome the curse. All right. This is really like.
This is great.
I am the least superstitious
great.
person you know. And also, just to show you what a shithead I was at 32, what does Bruce Lee dying at 32 have anything to do with me, right? It's like, enough about me. What do you think about me? This is like where my head was at that time. Like, no, it's all about me right now, right? And so, I grew my hair long, and then I survived my 32nd year.
Oh, man.
And then I shaved my head, and that was it, right? Then I was like, okay, I'm done.
Okay, I made it.
I completely shaved it. It was like renewal.
Wow.
But it was like a strange thing. I'll tell you another funny story. All right, I might have mentioned this on the KFG podcast before. Might have mentioned it on Dudes of Kung Fu before.
Might have.
All right.
Let's
but I think,
see.
but speaking of weird superstitions regarding Bruce Lee's death and weird stuff, all right. So I have a friend, and you know who this is. Do not say their name.
Yes.
Okay, do not say their name. All right? Let's say I have a friend who bears a striking resemblance to Bruce Lee. Mm-hmm. All right? As a matter of fact, the first time I met this guy, I almost fainted. And I'm going to be very honest with you. I almost fainted.
It's David Henry Hwang, isn't it?
It's David Henry Hwang.
Yes.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God, this is Bruce Lee. Just look at his tooth, right?
Yeah.
And no, all right. And for those of you who don't know
tooth.
that reference, you can go back to season 1.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was here at City Wing Chun, long time ago. This is late 2000s, and I was there at the front desk, and this guy walks in, and he with the glasses like Bruce Lee and everything. He looked so much like Bruce Lee. When you watch a movie and something miraculous happens, like someone comes back from the dead, or you see someone that shouldn't be there or whatever, like you watch a movie and you're like, oh man, that's crazy. Mm-hmm. When something like that happens in real life where you swear you're looking at someone who should not even be of this earth.
Okay.
Literally, I got dizzy and I actually took a step back. I was like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
Because the moment this guy walked in, the hair, the glasses, the gait, how he walked, the way he was dressed, I literally thought Bruce Lee from 1972 just walked into my school.
Walked in.
And like
you didn't think it was a prank?
No, the entire room spun for a moment, and I kind of stumbled back a little bit, and then I looked again. I realized, no, this isn't him.
Yeah,
this is someone who looks like him.
Okay,
all right.
Like
anyway,
Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee.
No, more like
Lee.
No, he looks more like Bruce Lee than a lot of
those dudes.
Guys, right?
Okay,
those Lee clones, right?
Wow.
And
this was when exactly?
This is a late 2000s.
Around the 32, 33 thing going on?
Yeah, somewhere around there. So I might have had the long hair then. I don't know. I can't say. I can't say for sure. So anyway, start talking to him. Interesting cat. Don't say his name. All right. Don't say his name.
I can't say his name.
Stop. Don't say his name. All right.
All right. I won't.
Surprise, surprise. He's an actor. All right. New York. But he ends up actually becoming a friend of mine. Right.
All good.
And
never mind that.
Yeah. So he. So this guy's really interesting. All right. He was an actor. He danced for Madonna in one of her tours. He's in one of Madonna's music videos. Did stuff on HBO, right? I mean, like he's done a bunch of stuff, right? And we later became friends and hung out and all that kind of stuff, right? And he knows Betty Ting Pei. Okay, all right, and which is an interesting.
Wait,
thing. They know each
how
other.
well do they know each other?
I don't know. I don't know. But they know each other. He's met her in Hong Kong. He's got
He's
photos
hung out
with her.
He's slept over
Yes.
her.
I don't know about that. No,
crib.
I don't think so. I don't think so. But from what I understood, she believed that this friend of mine is the reincarnation of Bruce Lee. All right?
You don't believe in reincarnation, do you?
No, I don't believe in reincarnation. If I believed in reincarnation, what the hell would that say about who the hell you were in your previous life?
Oh, man.
All right, to have to be
Bunch
subjected
of
to
jackals.
this torture sitting across from me while I spew a bunch of
Bunch
nonsense.
of jackals I was.
Yeah. So she believed that he was the reincarnation of Bruce Lee.
Okay.
And Betty is supposedly, since the death of Bruce Lee, she became a devout Buddhist. Although I think she actually became a Buddhist a bit later. Mm-hmm. And so she brought this friend of mine to the Buddhist temple near Lantau Island. You know, the big Buddha, which is a big tourist trap.
Yeah.
It's like the huge Buddha, right? There's a Buddhist monastery, I think called Paulin, which is connected to that big Buddha over there.
Yeah.
She brought him to, first I think to the Peninsula Hotel, which was a hotel that Bruce Lee loved to frequent. He goes there to meet her, and he's greeted by like a bunch of Buddhist monks and an abbot from that temple. And he's kind of like taken aback, and she basically wants him to be tested by these Buddhist monks to see if he is in fact
Evaluated.
if the reincarnation of Bruce Lee. Now, how Buddhist monks are able to evaluate this, all right, is kind of beyond me, right?
Okay.
But
They
apparently,
hit your kneecap with a little hammer. or
yeah, and then they go, aha, he's got the reflexes of a kung fu genius. He must be Bruce
Must
Lee,
be
right?
Bruce.
So anyway, my friend, this actor, goes to the Buddhist temple. He's got to spend 3 days there. Okay. And while these monks evaluate him.
insane.
This is totally insane, right?
Wow.
And he has to eat vegetarian food because obviously they're Buddhist monks, and he's not a vegetarian, so he feels kind of weak. He's kind of lightheaded. He's got to get up every morning and meditate with them. So this is not just like a bunch of monks looking at him and like telling him to open his mouth and say, ah. They're like, he's got to get up, he's got to meditate with them, he's got to like eat with them, all this kind of stuff. It's totally crazy, right?
Yeah.
And I guess on the third day, the final day, my friend starts getting a headache. All right, because he's getting up every morning, his routine is off, he's eating this food and stuff like that, and he asks Betty, okay, I shit thee not,
Food.
I shit thee not, all right. He asks Betty for a headache, or Betty offers him
She offered it.
a pill
Don't
for his
say
headache,
it.
right?
I'm
Now
done.
look.
I'm done.
Now look.
I'm leaving.
Okay. No.
can't.
Let's just assess the situation. Okay?
All right.
Imagine. All right. Imagine Dre. Okay. You are like. Let's just say, I mean, it's being a bit generous because my friend looks like Bruce Lee only when he dolls himself up. So in order for him to look like Bruce Lee, he's got to have the glasses on. He's got to do his hair like Bruce. He's got to wear. If he takes his glasses off and doesn't do his hair and dresses like a normal dude, you wouldn't say, "Oh, this guy dresses like this guy looks like Bruce Lee."
Okay.
He has to actually. He has to have all the accoutrements to look like Bruce Lee. Although one time I went down to Chinatown with him, and he did have like his Bruce Lee hairstyle and his glasses or whatever. And two NYPD police officers came up and they're like, "Sir, do you know you look like Bruce Lee? Can we take a photo with you?" Right?
Oh, okay.
So it's not
must
just
get
like
that
he
by
although
all the
he
cops.
doesn't always dress like Bruce Lee, but he does sometimes, right? I think it was definitely his shtick for a while.
Yeah.
So. All right, Dre, now imagine you are more or less the spitting image of Bruce Lee.
Okay.
All right, at least when you're dolled up with hair and makeup and everything, right? And you are hanging out with Betty Ting Pei. And you get a headache, like Bruce Lee did on that July day in 1973. Wow. And Betty Ting Pei offers you some kind of headache pill, all right? Just like she did to Bruce Lee, supposedly. All right? Whether that happened or not or whatever, okay? Wow. So, what is it in the movie Point Break? What do you do? What do you do? Or was that Speed? I don't know. It was a Keanu Reeves film for sure.
Well, you sounded like Bill Shatner when you said that.
Thank you. So, would you take the pill? Knowing the history of Betty Ting Pei giving the pill to people who look like Bruce Lee.
That is a
Would you take that pill?
that is probably the fastest no I would ever say. that would come out so fast, like
It would come out before
like
she even
projectile.
finishes the offer. You'd be like, no.
yeah, no, like fuck no. It'd be crazy fast.
Yeah. I'm not taking. I'm not going to take a
As she's
pill.
going into the purse, I'm
You'd be
like,
like,
wait,
hey,
hey.
Take it easy. Put that away. I ain't taking that. I know your history with Bruce Lee lookalikes and pills and headaches. This is not happening, right?
What?
Yeah.
What?
This was the
happened to
situation
him.
he found himself in. All right? And he told me this. And I remember, like, when he told me this setup.
Yeah.
And he's explaining it to me. I could look at. He was still like I could still
was
see.
traumatized
I could still
by
see
it.
the trauma of him essentially reliving this. Yeah, what
I need
should
him
be
to
a
tell
really
me-
difficult
tell
situation,
the
right?
story live. I need
You know,
this
I'm
story.
curious.
Can you get him on the show?
I don't know, man.
That would be great.
He's an actor.
He's a character.
He's very. You've met him before.
He's a
He's very kind of Hollywood.
awesome guy. Awesome.
and
character.
and those and I love them to death, but they tend to be a little head in the clouds.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like if I got him on the podcast, it would be unlike the normal tight sets. What we're talking about this now. The question was about realistic fight scenes, and now I'm talking about Bruce Lee death super. We're still on the first one, right? This has nothing to do with the first question, right? So not like the tight ship that is the Kung Fu Genius.
Right.
I have a feeling that if I actually got him on,
He'll
it
be
would
Dre for a day.
It would be the most meandering nonsense you've ever
Dre
heard.
for a day. He has the questions right here.
I don't know if that format would work. I don't know if that format would work. All right, I do it. Don't get me wrong. I love him to death.
People would love it. The
I
people
don't
would
know,
love
man.
it.
I don't know. Okay,
People.
well, all right, guys,
Okay,
Chime in.
Here's the
Chime
thing.
in. Should I do an episode of the Kung Fu Genius with someone? Now, mind you, he doesn't really look like. So to be fair, because I don't want anyone to be disappointed.
Yeah.
He
look more like.
This. First of all, that was we're talking about 12 years ago
Okay.
when he
He
definitely
was-
went through a Bruce Lee phase. He's not in that phase anymore. He
Okay.
doesn't actually look like Bruce Lee. All right, anymore. He used to.
All right.
If he wears sunglasses, he might give a little bit of a vibe, but I'm just going to tell you right now, he doesn't look exactly like Bruce Lee.
he
So I
had
don't
the
want to
Bruce
go
Lee
like, oh,
vibe.
that dude doesn't look like Bruce Lee
He
or
had the
whatever, right?
vibe though. Okay.
But he's a bit of he's an actor.
Yeah.
And actors tend the weird thing about him is that he'll sometimes tell me the wildest stories, and I'll be like, no way is this story true. All right? And then something will come up,
and it would confirm it.
and it'll confirm it, and I'll be, oh my God, Jesus Christ, somebody's got to write this guy's life story, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm wondering if when I went through my weird, when I was 32, when I went
Yeah.
through this overcoming Bruce
That's when
thing.
that came up.
No,
I'm sure that's
just saying,
that same
no.
year
If
he came
when I
around.
was in that phase,
Yeah.
if Betty had offered me a headache,
Oh.
like what would I probably would have melted into a
Yeah.
puddle of just scared nonsense.
Yes. Oh, that would have been awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Yo, so I want to bring it back around here. 'cause
Bring it back
we
around.
We are meandering off. Except it's
Same
fantastic.
question.
It's fantastic.
But I think it wouldn't be such a bad idea that if we could do a reaction video to actual, and when I say realistic, I mean realistic fight scenes. So there has to be like a standard that says that we can't have
Hey.
anything that comes out of like, martial arts movies or anything like that. Let's see how realistic, actual realistic fight scenes are, right?
I would love it.
And then the second thing is, just while I was looking online, I found that...
Bum fights?
no, bum fights would be amazing. Oh my God, very 2000s, but you know,
Very
That's
2000s.
face.
I think we would get canceled for even talking about that.
no, I happened to like look up because I was trying to find some good ones. The top, some nonsense like website, the
Nonsense.
top 20 greatest and in parentheses most realistic movie fight scenes of all the time. And
Oh.
apparently, the fight between Bruce Lee and Bob Wall made it to number 7 as a realistic fight.
As a
scene.
realistic fight,
Yes.
where he just Wing Chuns his ass at the beginning and then kicks him in the balls after Bob Wall. So let's look at the highlights of that fight scene,
Yeah.
all right? They start in a cross-handed position, which is very atypical of fighting, but I guess that was the setup in the
how
you
you set it up.
what you see, like, okay, why are they starting with their hands crossed? All right, because Bruce needed to figure out a way to make Wing Chun work in that fight scene. Right, okay, so how are you going to make Wing Chun work against Bob Wall? You got to set it up that
Yeah,
way,
you
right?
gotta set it up.
Otherwise it's going to be very artificial looking, right? And then he Wing Chuns his ass like in 3 beats, you know, back fist, and does it twice, and then Bob Wall blocks like the 3rd time, and then he goes low high and then back fist, right? And then Bob Wall gets pissed and grabs his leg. There's the back flip kick, which is so realistic. Bruce Lee couldn't even do it himself. All right, he had to get Yuen Wah, his stunt guy, to do it, right?
Wow, this is number 7.
Yeah, and then after that, you know, he gets Bob Wall gets pissed and charges Bruce Lee with a jump side kick, and Bruce goes on his back and kicks Bob Wall in the balls. All right, he up kicks him in the balls, right?
The timing is
and then they're standing,
beautiful.
and then they're kind of bobbling back and forth, right? And Bruce, you know, gives him some quick kicks, quick spinning back kick, and basically embarrasses the crap out of him, right? And then eventually runs at him with that side kick, and then just kicks him right through the wall of
dudes.
extras. And you have the late Lam Ching Ying catching Bob Wall, but also the stuntman Zheng Wing Han.
Chun Wing
Yeah, he was
Hong.
one of those guys there. He's also back there catching Bob Wall. And I met Zheng Wing Han a few years ago in Hong Kong when I met Siu Hao, right? And he's a veteran stunt guy. He also did a lot of Golden Harvest stuff with Jackie Chan or whatever. And he told, like, I asked him a lot about being on the set of Enter the Dragon. And there's some photos of Bruce holding a kick in front of him while he's wearing the Han karate outfit, you know? And he's very proud of that. He has it on his phone. Like, mind you, he's worked with Jackie and Sammo and all these guys. He's like one of the senior stunt guys in Hong Kong now. I mean, he doesn't do it actively. But after his entire body of work doing stuff like Police Story with Jackie Chan,
wow.
like epic stunt stuff.
You got the resume.
He's got the resume. When you hang out and have dim sum with him now, he's like, yo, I was in Enter the Dragon. Wow. You know what I mean? He's literally, I think he's in the bus scene, with the double-decker bus scene with Jackie Chan
I was
in
just
Police
thinking
Story,
about
right?
that scene.
But like he will still go, I was one of Han's guys in Enter the Dragon, right? So like think about that, to have that early on. And he was the one who told me how great Bruce was to the stunt guys and fighting to make sure that they got good food, and that he would yell at Raymond Chow in front of the stunt guys, and often during the break he wouldn't go into his office, he would into his trailer or whatever, he would just sit there and hang with those guys, right? And he told me that of all the guys he ever worked with, that Bruce Lee was the nicest to all the stunt guys, right? So yeah, anyway, that fight. So then Bob Wall gets kicked, and then Bob Wall gets pissed. He goes up, he grabs and smashes the bottle, and then attacks Bruce with the bottle. Bruce kicks it out of his hand, and then gives him that roundhouse kick where he's got the padding in his sock that everyone sees, and then jumps up and crushes him. All right. And there's nothing remotely realistic about that fight scene.
Not according to this synopsis here,
All right. So
right?
what other realistic fight scenes are on there too?
Oh
that
my
list.
god. Well,
By the way,
okay.
shout out to the Kung Fu Genius who had all the choreography of the Bruce Lee Bob Wall fight in his head.
Hey.
All right.
Yes.
What else we got?
Let me see. Do you ever see End of Watch?
No.
Okay, so that's like that.
End of Watch.
Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
A long time ago, but
Who's in End of Watch
I
again?
couldn't comment.
That's
Oddly
decent.
enough, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was inspiration for the end of Fist of Fury, where Bruce runs out to the firing squad and then jumps and then gets shot, because it's essentially, spoiler alert, what happens at the end of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. They go out in a blaze of glory, right?
Yeah.
What else you got?
Warrior. You know,
Warrior.
Tom Hardy.
No, actually, you know what? I didn't see that.
Okay, Blood on the Sun, 1945 with Jimmy Cagney.
Oh, there's a judo scene in there.
Yes, making full use of judo throws, dirty boxing, and rear naked choke.
Yeah. I have seen that scene, but it's been a number of years since I saw it, so I would have to watch it again to comment on it. But I do know about
Jimmy
the judo
James.
in there.
Yeah, they put all the YouTube videos up on this thing, so maybe like that.
Yeah, maybe that'll be a good video in the future.
So My Bodyguard, which is, it says it's Matt Dillon's film debut, so it's all the way back in 1980. Boo to
Is
that.
it better than Singles?
No. Anyway, 2, John Wick.
Oh yeah, very realistic.
Totally realistic. No one's going to argue with John Wick. Oh, number 1, Lethal Weapon, and it has to be it's the one where he fights Gary Busey right at the end.
Does he have a triangle choke at the end? Or an arm lock, because I know that he was training with Jorge and Gracie back there for like one of those, and he had like did like a sloppy triangle choke or something.
Yeah,
like
he puts him into an arm lock if I remember
right,
rightly,
or something like that.
Just knocks him out, and then right at the end, Gary Busey wakes up, pulls the gun out of like one of the guys that's got like goes to shoot him, and he turns around and.
Right, super realistic.
Yeah. Realistic.
All right,
we got to add some gunshots to that.
What's the second question for today?
What we're talking about, it's not a sad trombone. That was a great first question.
Yes.
Oh, that question will reign supreme for some time.
And you know it was great. It wasn't even a question.
It wasn't even a question. That's the best part about it.
All right. So if you guys really want, if you guys comment below and you want me to really talk about whatever you want me to talk about, don't write it in the form of a question. Just write a statement.
The secret. Yeah.
And then I can spend 50 minutes talking about it, right?
That is the
All
secret.
right. What else we got?
Oh, whew.
Hey, Kung Fu Genius listeners, if you're a Wing Chun practitioner, especially from the WT or Leung Ting line, and want to get really personalized immersion training with me, you can now apply to do an immersion course with me here in NYC, or if you like the sun, in my Florida home near Orlando. These courses are for instructors or anyone who's serious about learning the art in detail and working hard. I teach in program blocks like Siunam Tao, Chamkyu, Buji, Wooden Dummy, and those include the Chi Sao theory, fighting applications, and training methods as well. If you're really serious about learning Wing Chun, check out the link in the description below to find out about applying for a spot. For those of you who are not quite ready to do full private immersion training, you can also apply for a spot at either our winter or summer intensive training camps. We have a few spots available for non-city Wing Chun students, so apply today. A link for those options are in the description below. And now back to me.
All right. Next up, Andrew Lin.
Andrew Lin, I've heard of this guy.
Yeah, he's a frequenter. Okay, so do you know if Bruce Lee closely monitored his diet calorie intake to complement his strength training routine? Whoa, that's interesting.
So I don't really know that. That's a better question for John Little, because John Little has more access to that kind of stuff. What I do know is Bruce definitely was big on protein intake, all right? Especially if you're lifting more weights, you want to make sure that you're getting enough protein for, muscle development. If you don't have enough protein, you may not be able to build muscle. So I do know that Bruce was like that, his protein intake, because he was taking protein shakes, and then he did experiment with blending like a hamburger or blending some beef or something like that, right? Those stories, which later became the rumor that he drank cow's blood or something like that, right? And so I do know that he took a lot of supplements, and he was definitely worried about protein intake. But I don't know if his overall caloric intake was something that he paid a lot of attention to. Obviously, he wasn't like a big junk food eater. And you could look at his body, especially in during the time in Hong Kong. He was extremely lean. We have a couple theories for why he might be so lean. Well, one to be fair, his it's not just the cocaine stuff. It's not to clown him or whatever, right? Certainly with the revelations of the cocaine use, his stripping away of water weight and that kind of look that he had can be better explained through just regular use of cocaine in those last 2 years.
Rockstar diet.
Yep. But also, let's not forget that he had a breakneck work schedule and work ethic during that time, where he's still training, he's still lifting weights, he's still hitting the bag, he's still working, improving his martial prowess, and he's shooting films and writing and doing press stuff or whatever. So, like, from morning to night, you can imagine he had a very packed schedule. So he's extremely active. Plus, John Little is also of the opinion that the extreme heat in Hong Kong is one of the reasons why, he's sweating a lot. He's losing a lot of interstitial water weight. So he's relatively striated because he's constantly like somewhat dehydrated or whatever. Although Tom Bleeker's idea is that because he's taking all these diuretics and cortisone and stuff like that, although that doesn't really seem to line up. It was a nice theory at the time, but it's got chewed away by the cold light of the internet.
Yeah.
So there's a number of reasons why he stayed really lean. I don't know if that was pure caloric intake, like if he was super worried about how many calories he was consuming, right? Also, don't forget that if you are more active, you need to consume more calories, all right? Especially if you want to keep on muscle mass, right? So you can't just eat protein. You need to make sure that you're consuming enough calories for your energy expenditure, especially if he's hitting the bag and doing stuff like that. And you need that for muscle development. If you're not eating enough, you're not going to grow muscle and you're not going to have any energy to do stuff. So, but I don't know how calculating he was on like calories and stuff. Remember also at that time, it's not like now you have you have the calories of everything written everywhere. You go to a coffee shop nowadays. Yeah, it wasn't even a thing that many years ago, right? You go to a coffee shop and like it'll tell you on the menu how many calories that coffee has, right? That wasn't the case, so I don't know how accurate people could have been anyway trying to count that stuff back in those days, right? You would have to be a real circus freak with like a book of like a calorie counter book like to figure that out, right? I've seen the receipts of some of Bruce Lee's meals that he had during his time in Hong Kong, namely at the Peninsula Hotel and also elsewhere. And it's difficult to say because like the receipt is quite long, so obviously he's probably eating with other people. But I'm just going to say and of course this doesn't prove anything because if I saw two receipts, well, I'm looking at two meals he had in a 2.5 year period in Hong Kong or 1.5 year period in Hong Kong. That doesn't mean that, you always have to be careful when people are like, oh, well, I saw a receipt and it had this. And then somehow people take that to mean that was always the case, right? But from the receipts that I did see, and also the photos that I've seen of him at restaurants, it didn't seem like he really paid that much attention to it. Like he seemed to just eat whatever the hell he felt like. Yeah. And eat, he ate a lot of Chinese food. He liked beef with oyster sauce was one of his favorite dishes. And
you know what they call Chinese food in Hong Kong, right?
Food. It's my joke. Actually, it's not my joke. I think it's Jerry. It's an old Seinfeld joke. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Or no, it might even be from Family Guy.
Okay.
Or
both.
Or both. But one of the receipts I saw, there was a crap ton of food on there. Whew. But of course, you don't know how many people was he eating with. You know what I mean? And maybe like the stuff on there that was like super fatty or whatever might have been for Raymond Chow or might have been for someone else, right? But from the impression I get, I don't think that Bruce was there with a calorie counter worried about that stuff. Bruce actually had the opposite problem. I have a copy of a doctor's note, which was the doctor that removed his sweat glands. And that he went, I think it was around November of 1972. So it was November, the year before he died. And one of the complaints that Bruce had, one of the reasons why he went to the doctor, is specifically he was having a hard time keeping weight on. All right? So he was losing weight. He was $120 something at the doctor. In November of 72. So this is after Way the Dragon, which in my opinion, I think he looked best in Way the Dragon. Like I liked his body composition there best. Some people like it in Fists of Fury. I actually don't think there's a big difference. I think people don't account for the difference in lighting and sets, thinking like, oh, his body was vastly different between these two films. They're actually not really that different. But I know the moment I say that, people are going to be butthurt in the comments. There's really not a big difference between Bruce Lee's body in Fists of Fury and Way the Dragon. It's just that Way the Dragon has this iconic shot where he's on the balcony like this, and you could see how big his lat spread was. But that doesn't mean that he was like a totally different dude from the previous film he just made, right? Because Bruce clearly had a problem keeping on weight, and why we can say clearly, because there's a doctor's note where he complained to the doctor about he had a couple issues. One, he went to the doctor on that particular occasion with 3 problems. One was the excessive sweating. All right. The second one was his inability to keep on body weight. He just was losing weight and wasn't able to keep it on. And the third one was acne.
Okay.
All right. Which is, I think, why some people have postulated that he might have been taking anabolic steroids or whatever. But he didn't have backney. All right. Acne on your back, right? It was on his face. All right.
All right.
And so I don't see that. And also when you look at his body, I mean, I believe if you look at the steroids at that time, maybe with the exception of Anavar. Why do I know about that? Because I've actually done the research on this. Because people say this shit all the time. So I'm like, all right, let me, I watch like Coach Greg videos and more plates, more dates. So I would get some information about anabolic steroids so I could then...
Anavar.
Yeah, because I think that was one of the main ones that was around at that time. It doesn't really seem like if Bruce was taking the shit that was available at that time, extreme weight loss and striation doesn't really seem like that would be the result. John Little changed my mind in real time on that podcast we did about Bruce Lee's training methodology. Because I was like, when Bruce Lee came to Hong Kong, suddenly he became this big jack dude or whatever. And he actually showed me a photo of Bruce Lee in 1969. Which is before Bruce went to Hong Kong, where Bruce had his shirt off. And he's like, look at his pec development. Look at the size of his shoulders. Look at the size of his arms. He goes, it's the same as in Fist of Fury. What I think people don't realize is Bruce was one of these guys who, when he's at rest, he doesn't look that big because he wasn't a big guy at all. I mean, he was 5'7" and he was very small. You remember when we went to Hong Kong and we saw the mannequins with his clothing?
With his clothes.
I mean, when we go to the Hong Kong, the Bruce Lee exhibit.
Clothing.
Yeah, the Bruce Lee exhibit in Hong Kong at the Hong Kong Heritage Museum. They have his clothing on mannequins, like actual clothing that was worn by Bruce Lee, and it's behind a glass case, and it's actual size. And when you stand in front of it, you stand in front of Bruce Lee, a mannequin of Bruce Lee. His shoulders actually were very narrow. Like when you look at it, you go like, because I'm also 5'7".
Yeah.
But Bruce Lee could fit inside me, no problem. All right, like with plenty of space.
All right.
That
Because-
could sound so wrong.
Whatever. All right. Get your mind out of the gutter, Brit. All right. His shoulders were very narrow. His waist was really small. So I think when Bruce was relaxed, he didn't look like big or puffed up or anything like that. But when he did his lat spread and then tenses the head of his shoulders, it changes his shape dramatically, right? And so when I saw this photo of Bruce Lee in 1969 with his shirt off, and John Little was like, look at his actual size, like his chest, his shoulders. He goes, that's the same size he always was. The difference is that when he was in Hong Kong, he got a lot more striated, meaning that there was less fat and less water, so you could see the muscles more. Wow. All right, but there's no actual size difference. Bruce's clothing size did not change from his time in LA to his time in Hong Kong. He wore the same size clothing. As a matter of fact, he sometimes even wore Linda's stuff. Okay. You can actually find photos of Bruce Lee wearing like this pullover. And in another photo, you see Linda's wearing it because he could actually fit in her stuff. Because he was not a big dude at all. So this idea that he was like suddenly taking all these steroids when he was in Hong Kong and getting huge and jacked, look, with lighting and with flex, you can look like a totally different person. You even know, like, when we go upstairs and we work out, right? If you're like this and then you look normal, you take a photo, you don't look like anything, right? You get that overlighting, you flex out like this, you turn and you twist your body, suddenly you look like a totally different person, right?
Muscles popping all over the place.
Yeah, and
Muscles
and
I never
so
seen myself.
this idea that Bruce suddenly became super, super jacked is I was wrong about it because I was one of the people who believed that, like that there was this huge change in his body composition, when in reality he was just more emaciated later on and just better at posing, in front of the camera, right? So, being that Bruce went to the doctor with this problem of keeping body weight on, I think if anything, Bruce would probably try to eat more. So, like that receipt that I saw, which just looked like he was gorging himself on food. If that was just him eating all that food, I wouldn't be surprised because he was probably trying to gain weight because he could not gain weight. He went to the doctor because he couldn't gain weight. So I would be under the impression that he was probably trying to eat more for the sake of gaining weight. All right, because he's trying to add weight. So, yeah. But I don't know. That's a question that better for John Little.
All right.
All right, what else we got?
One more? We got time?
Yeah, we got
Maybe
time.
two more.
Maybe two. Okay.
Depends.
All right.
I mean,
Depends how long I answer. There's not another statement on there, right? Otherwise, we're here for another
We've got
hour.
time for half a question more.
Dario Torres.
All right. God, I thought it was going to be a Dyson question
Yeah,
for
so
a
did
moment.
I. I was just
Can you imagine 2 actual questions and a Dyson, and that's the whole episode?
No.
I would commit Harry
He didn't-
Carey right
he
here.
He didn't send anything in the comments.
All right, let's
for
go.
some reason.
Let's go. Or that dreadful Dr. Ison.
Oh God.
What's his deal?
I don't know what his deal is.
He's got some very dubious credentials.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dryzen likes you. Dr. Eisen does not.
No, he definitely doesn't like me.
He doesn't like you.
All right, yeah.
That's interesting. Dario Torres.
All right.
Question. Among all the mysteries surrounding Chinese martial arts, especially Wing Chun good old days, one thing that always intrigued me was the real fighting skills of the late Grandmaster Yip Man. Is there any information about that or about this topic? I know it's not an easy subject due to the big lack of data and a lot of misconceptions, but I still would love to hear your take on it. Thank you, Sifu, and shout out to everybody on the team.
Awesome. Yeah. That's a great question. I mean, we just recently did part 1
Did it air yet?
Well, by the time this one comes out, it should have. That's how orders work, Dre.
That's how it works.
All right.
Oh, you're
Yo,
right,
Mikey,
you're right.
can you explain normal shit to him after this podcast?
Normal-
all right. Yes,
normal
we
shit.
recorded that episode before this one we're recording now. So the assumption is that one will come out before this one.
I would hope
all right?
so.
Okay. Unless we decide to shelve it or bench it for a later date or something, right?
Which
Right?
gets happened.
These
Yes.
cows are small. Those ones are far away.
Good stuff.
Okay.
That's a good one.
So we did part 1 of the history of Yip Man, all right? And then who knows how many other parts we're going to do, 2, 3, whatever. Basically, long-ass episodes saying, I don't really know, but this is what I heard. I don't really know, but this is what I heard, all right? So we will get to the fighting exploits of Yip Man in those upcoming episodes, because the first episode, which we already recorded, basically I talked about Yip Man's history before coming to Hong Kong permanently in 1949. So we talked about when he was learning from his first Sifu, Chan Washun, and then his seeing Chung So, and then supposedly this meeting with Leung Bik, which was supposedly came to be because of a fight Yip Man had with a Pakistani cop. There was a Pakistani cop beating up a Chinese woman, and then the young, fiery Yip Man came and bloodied that guy's face, and then word of this exploit got to Leung Bik, and then Leung Bik taught him or something like that. But again, who the hell knows if any of this stuff is true, right?
I don't know.
Well, here's the thing, Dre. If that story happened 3 weeks ago and someone was telling it now, there would already be some bullshit in that story. Okay. Now we're talking about, this story happened in, 1910, 1912. Okay. Now I'm going to tell you this is exactly how it happened. And there are no eyewitnesses and no primary sources for this story, right? So the truth is that we don't know, and that's what makes it difficult. Of course, with the Yip Man movies, the Yip Man movie narratives are slowly starting to overtake the real-life story of Yip Man. So we have, I guess you could call it the Wong Fei Hong effect of when you have a real person who is now so highly fictionalized by so many films that fictionalized narrative takes the front seat over the real story, right? Like, what do we actually know about the real Wong Fei Hong? Well, you have to go to some Hong Kong people so that they could tell you some kind of, sort of, maybe stories they might know that were passed down. But if you ask the average martial arts buff about Wong Fei Hong, probably more than half of what they tell you is probably just re-engineered nonsense from Kwon King films or Jet Li or something like that, right? And I think that, give another 10, 15 years, and then most of what people quote unquote know about Yip Man is some variation of something that happened in his films, right? Because people look at the films and then go, what is the real version of this? And they try to deconstruct that and then make a real story out of the fake shit that's in the movies, instead of going, no, don't take the movies as a guide. Try to actually do some research on the real story. So the things that we don't really know, that, when Yip Man was younger, supposedly, obviously he was scrappier. I think what people always forget about Yip Man, and maybe this is a fault of the Donnie Yen movies, is that by the time Yip Man came to Hong Kong and started teaching Wing Chun, he was already kind of an old guy. All right, old. I mean, I don't mean
in the
actually
sense of
old.
Back then, especially.
No, I mean in the sense of, like, this is not a 20-something or 30-something opening a martial arts school.
It was like 58.
He was like in his late 50s when he started teaching. So all these stories about Yip Man fighting in the 50s, I go like, dude, he was like in his 60s at that time. Who's he fighting with? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, maybe Leung Seung wanted to test him out, and then Yip Man, deflected his attacks and showed him what was up or whatever, and then that's why Leung Seung joined or whatever. But this doesn't mean that this was an all-out fight that happened in 1949 or 1950 between Yip Man and a curious Leung Seung, right? Like this was some kind of, they're locked in a cage trying to kill each other, so much as like, okay, you do martial arts, okay, he throws a couple punches at him and Yip Man deflects it and then puts his hand on his face and then he goes, okay, all right, this guy knows what he's doing, I'm going to learn from this guy. Like, is that a fight, or is that just kind of a, well, let me see what you can do, oh, this guy knows something, I'm going to go and follow him, right? I think that the idea is that these were like really, I think that they become more serious in hindsight than they actually were when these things happen, right? Most of the fighting, I really believe, occurred between Yip Man students like Wong Sun Leung and these guys against the other Kung Fu people, not so much Yip Man himself. He was an old guy at that point, right?
Okay.
So we've heard some stories about it being feistier when he was younger, and then there's the story that, someone pulled a gun on him and then he held the chamber with his fingers, keeping the gun from rolling, which they actually used that in the first Yip Man movie, which was kind of based on a real story-ish, right? And then there's some supposedly in Fatsan, there was like somebody who came from some northern style, and then Yip Man beat him. So some things that were then loosely interpreted into the Yip Man films, but how do we know any of that stuff is true, right? These are just stories that are told and told again, right? So the truth is we don't really know.
That's the truth.
Yeah. What I do find kind of interesting is that, you have to kind of look at someone's character over, you have to, when you don't really know about someone and you want to get a picture of them, especially someone like Yip Man, of which we have very little video footage. There's no audio interviews with him. There's only a couple magazine interviews. You have to kind of piece that together and kind of look at it collectively to get a vibe of what he was like. But then again, you don't know how much of that, of what was written about him, or even in those interviews he did, was also re-engineered by the editor. You don't know, all right? Okay. But I get the impression from what Yip Man wrote that he doesn't give the impression of someone who was prone to exaggeration. He admits that, when he was younger and he was feisty, and then he met Leung Bick and he tried to fight him and Leung Bick beat him and stuff like that. And people who can admit that they were beaten at some point in their life, I think it tends to have a little bit more credibility than the guy who just talks about what an ass kicker he always was. And then Yip Man, in his first interview, he talks a lot about fighting someone who's very powerful, how you have to be flexible in footwork, and so you have to move and all those kind of things, and those are words from someone who most likely had some experience, right? Okay. Because it's only the fantasists that believe that someone is going to come and try to murder your face with their fists, and you're going to stand there and root your power into the ground and take all that force and put it into the floor. It's like, no. If I put boxing gloves on someone of decent athleticism in front of most of these kung fu guys, and the guy with the boxing gloves starts swinging, you're going to see that kung fu guy move. He's not going to stand there and try to hold onto the person's arms and push him back or something like that. Get out of here, all right? Yip Man was someone who talked about how your footwork needs to be mobile and flexible, and you have to avoid the power of the opponent and stuff like this, and basically get your body offline to whatever's coming at you. And these are things that are these are things that anybody with experience is going to say. These are not the nonsense dribblings of a fantasist like a Frank Dukes or something like that, right? So I think when you look at that stuff collectively, I think you get the impression that Yip Man was not someone who was really prone to bullshit and overplaying things or whatever. Now, some of his students certainly were, but I don't think Yip Man himself was that way. So, yeah, that's my observation. Let's see. I think maybe a super short one is all we got.
Super short. Let's see.
By the way, Frank Dukes is not a fraud.
How dare you?
All right. TT.
All right.
What's your take on Adam Chan's theory regarding WTWC having more Hakka and less Cantonese origin, but lacking the intended shocking energy in the striking techniques, A's, razor, and all of that? Sorry if you already addressed this and I missed it, and maybe you can use the Dyson time machine to go check this out. Great podcast. Keep up the good work, guys.
That's a great question.
It's not.
I have a little bit of experience with Hakka martial arts.
Okay.
But we have 5 minutes left in this podcast.
Oh, no.
And this is we're like, hey, let's wrap it up with a quick one, and then throw that one. Let's hold that one for a future date, because that's all I gotta say about that. All right, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Kung Fu Genius. As always, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the Kung Fu Genius, write in the comments below any questions you want me to answer on a future episode. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
Word is I'm a kung fu genius. Technique speaks for me, not lineage. Forget Jet Li, cause I'm the one. Many call me seafood, but to you I'm sea gung. And I produce masters. You surpassed us. Your kung fu stiffer than corpse and caskets. City Wing Chun is the house I built. Violate the gate and your blood gets spilt. Alex Richter, always the victor.
So, I totally forgot what the hell I was talking about.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from YouTube. Lots of gems, lots of realistic fight scenes, lots of if Betty Ting Pei gave you a headache pill, would you take it? Let's get to it. What was that?
Close.
Close?
But no cigar.
Oh, no, not even a blunt. I mean,
Yeah, no. hey, this is oh no, it's legal now. You can talk about it.
it's so
It's absolutely
legal.
fine, you know what I
so
mean?
legal.
Absolutely. So yeah. Sorry, Seagull, I know you gotta go teach. So anyway, let's do it again, alright?
Why is he going
Look at-
so
dude,
slouch
he
and
is angry with you right now. Look
Yeah.
at him, he's seething.
yeah,
He
I'm
can't
sorry.
even speak.
All right.
Come on, get it done, Dre.
All right. Lots of gems, lots of realistic fight scenes, lots of if Betty Ting Pei gave you
Who's
what?
Betty Ting Pei?
Betty Ting Pei?
Betty Ting Pei? Ting
Who's-
Pei. Betty Ting Pei.
Betty Ting Pei.
For so long and still not know that name.
Betty Ting Pei.
Yeah, he said Betty Ting
Betty
Pei.
Ting Pei.
Ting Pei.
Betty Ting Pei.
Ting Pei.
Betty Ting Pei. Lots of gems, lots of realistic fight scenes, lots of if Betty Ting Pei gave you a headache medicine, would you take it?
Should be a headache pill, not a headache medicine.
Headache medicine.
I think Betty Ting Pei gave you headache medicine or gave you a headache pill, but not a headache medicine.
Ready? Headache pill or headache tablet.
I'm gonna try to go for headache tablet. All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Chiu
Nice. Wow. Very good. Very good. Fist bump time.
What happened,
Beautiful.
Sifu? You don't want
Yeah.
to clap?
Yeah. Look, he did it. He got it right.
He's still pissed.
Yeah, I think he's not talking to you for a while, son. All right. Okay.
Yes.